before, but who sees this program? I mean, where does it land?
Let's see, Facebook, YouTube, they've been in private groups. And part of it being in private groups is that from a production end, you get it in, you get who you're appealing to. So you can tweak to who you want to get to. But who we're appealing to is exactly what we want to hit. I mean, we're talking about demographics. Oh, by the way, Rabbi, you are the most relatable to young black men 18 to 23.
Get out of here! That is crazy.
Yes, yes. And,
Wow.
and Iman carries the weight of the demographics that are 26 to 50.
Really?
Yes. Although Dr. Lang is blowing you all out of the water because she's relating to everybody.
Yeah. Well, the one
Well, good.
standalone piece about Dr. Lang is when she goes to preach, and all the wives of all the ministers on the army base are not happy with her, and so she does her own thing, and everyone shows up to her service. I mean, that right there tells me everything. Because obviously her appeal it transcends anything that you and I might have expected.
Ain't take
Race,
much
gender,
credit for that.
age, right?
All right, the intro screen's going right now, Vince.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's live on my end.
All right. Eric wants me to email him. So, okay, this is how we're going to run. We're going to do the opening. I'm going to introduce myself and then introduce Eric. Everyone else just remains silent. Okay, Ricky is coming on right now, and he'll be joining soon. And then from that point, I'm going to do a short presentation. Then we will bring on Dr. Wright and Ricky to talk about it. And I'll give him some time to tell his story, about 5 minutes to tell his story. And then from that point, we'll all, start the conversation. Okay, now, Mr. Duncan.
How you doing?
Good, good. I want to introduce you to, of course, Dr. Wright, Rabbi Seth Fish.
Frisch with an R.
Frisch with an R.
Yeah.
Reverend Dr. Lang, and Iman Brashear.
How you doing, brother?
How's you brothers doing? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam.
Okay, we got a couple of minutes delay. So Ed, go ahead and do your do we have any intros on the YouTube?
Yeah, we are currently on YouTube right now. The intro screen's going, so whenever you guys are ready.
Okay, we're waiting on my co-host.
Like I muted it.
So, as I said, what do you prefer to be called, Mr. Duncan?
Ricky is good. Ricky is good.
Okay, so as soon as Eric gets on, we're going to start recording the show. I'll do the introduction, bring in my co-host. We're going to introduce the title of the show. We're going to do a short presentation. Then
Alright. Does anybody have Instagram or Twitter here by any chance? Yeah, you can search up our TV show actually on Instagram. It's What You Got to Say, no spaces or capitals. We just made it, so you could be the first follower for all we know. So that's a privilege within itself. What's it's the official one. That's the one. The other two are imposters. I don't know who they are. Yep, there we go. Woo! Yeah, right? We gotta trademark this instantly. It will be here. I'm pulling up Twitter right now to make sure I have the. Yeah, I could do that actually. So for Instagram, it is What You Got to Say, and then for Twitter, it's yeah, it's at What You Gotta Say oh, are you asking for Twitter now? For Twitter, for whatever reason, Twitter made the name What You Got to Say, but instead of the Y, it's a 3. Yeah, I don't know why it did that. I'm in the process of fixing that, so. Oh, it's a 2 for you? It should be What You Got to Say instead of the Y. It should be a 3. That should be the account. Yeah, that is strange. I agree with you. Doctor figured it out though. She was on it. Yeah, so we're working on building the social media. So the moment we start posting, if you guys could give us a shout out, that would mean a lot. Only way to really help grow the community and really get people to actually watch the show. You know, 20th century now. We got the power of the people behind us in social media. How's Eric doing, Vince? I hope this show continues to go, but if this show doesn't continue to go, I will. Yeah, right? Yeah, she's the one calling the shots now. She's shutting you down, Vince. She said no more. Hey, there he is. Mr. Handsome himself. Just let me know when you guys are ready to go, and I will switch from the introduction to your beautiful faces. Alright. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Vincent, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Okay, now we're going to have a little technical thing with Eric right now.
Alright, that's no problem. I could. Alright, the stream's muted right now. We'll wait for Eric. It's fine. I went back to the introduction screen. Let me see. Yeah, we'll do a retake. Don't worry, we'll do a little take two. No problem. The moment I could hear Eric, I guess we'll begin. Eric, hello. What's going on? All right, cool. So take two. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, America. I'm Vincent Squire. Thank you for joining What You Gotta Say. Our topic today is on mass incarceration, the real story. But first, let me introduce my co-host, Mr. ADOS himself, the star of the Eric Dawson radio show, Eric Dawson.
Hey, welcome, man. How you doing today, Vincent?
Oh, I'm just great.
I'm excited about this topic, man.
Living the dream, living the dream. So let's start off with a quick share here. And we will get this party started. Okay, now, mass incarceration was basically a political move. The first in America, the first experiment of incarceration was, anybody know? Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. It was a Quaker experiment that believed that that putting a man in prison or prison penitence, bringing him back to restoration with humanity and God himself. And if you ever visited, they had a room for all faiths. And a majority of their curriculum was in terms of people regaining themselves in the God of their understanding. Now, the politics of prison became race, because it went from prison or penitence to they went from penitentiaries to prison. Prison, the word being Latin for seize and contain. Now, early, the institution of slavery or prison became, after the Reconstruction period, the second institution of slavery, in which people of color were incarcerated, false charges. And the big reason was not for their crimes, but for the simple fact that they were once again cheap labor, the commodity to the rich and powerful. From that point, David Onskoski said that prison turned out to be worse than slavery. After the period of Jim Crow, because of the prison population and incarcerating people of color, the white communities thrived. If you look at history, corporations like IBM, 3M, et cetera, all have prison laborers. Even today, the biggest person of the biggest benefit would be Wendy's, who has grown to $1 billion status off of hiring cheap prison labor. Prisons were responsible for doing things like building the roadways, the infrastructure. 95 through each state had a state prison, and as they called them at that time, a chain gang. Now, looking at this chart on the incarceration of America from 1920 to 2014, if you look right here, this is the post-construction era during the early 1920s. Now, one of the reasons that it got low is because the African American or the black population was involved in another experiment, World War I, in which they were now part of a mechanized fighting unit, and the peak again in 1940, leading to that point of the American Depression. Moving back, everybody looks at it, how it starts to peak up in the 70s. Big contributor to that was that we had now inherited at that time, it was starting to be a recession. Businesses were now closing. People were out of jobs. We had the gas crisis. We had OPEC, which basically dominated American income, and that began the mass transference of wealth in our country. At the time during the 70s and early 80s, we spent an average of $14 billion in transferable wealth out of our pockets. And we were looking at the job market closing, and people with graduate degrees were now unemployed. Now, in much of the 70s during Carter's administration and the energy crisis, it was followed by the recession. Now, so it increased the level of the prison population. Why? People didn't find jobs, so they fed their families through crime. Now, according to the Milwaukee Journal, on September 7th of that year of Carter, just a month earlier, the job report showed that unemployment amongst blacks were at 40% or higher. Now, where do we go from there? So we got an increase in prison, but not the mass incarceration, leading us to the winner of the election, Ronald Wilson Reagan. Now, Ronald Wilson Reagan increased the prison population, but yet everybody says that he did increase employment for blacks, which is half true. Ronald Wilson Reagan brought more technical industries into the United States. So African Americans or black people who had graduate degrees now started increasing the divide. The people who did not have graduate degrees were going further into unemployment and crime. The ones who did increase the black middle class. Now, the black middle class consisted of two things. You were either an industrial worker or assembly line worker, or you were a corporate worker. From that point, it went from Ronald Reagan, and this is how the mass incarceration or the new version of slavery started. Now, remember last time we talked about the American propaganda and the corporation of white supremacy through the Klan? Well, this is the next version of American propaganda.
Bush and Dukakis on crime.
This ad, made by George H.W. Bush's supporters for his 1988 presidential campaign, is infamous for stoking racial fears in an attack against his Democratic opponent, Michael Dukakis.
He allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
The 30-second ad was aimed at painting Dukakis as weak on crime, and it used photos of Horton in a way that played into racist stereotypes linking crime and black men. Critics say it encouraged race-based politics.
The insinuation is, if you elect Governor Dukakis as president, we're going to have black rapists running amok in the country, right? So it's playing to white fears about black crime.
The Bush campaign denied any involvement in the ad, but later aired a related one.
His revolving door prison policy gave weekend furloughs to first-degree murderers not eligible for parole.
This ad directly attacked furlough programs, a common practice at the time where inmates were allowed out of prison to visit family. It was the same program that gave Horton his so-called weekend pass. The effects of this political tactic by the Bush campaign lived on for years to come. When Bill Clinton took office, he took a similar tough-on-crime approach.
The message today to the Bloods, the Crips, to every criminal gang preying on the innocent is clear. We mean to put you out of business.
The Horton ad also gave way to racially charged politics that we continue to see today. A week before the 2018 midterm elections, President Trump's team released this ad, falsely connecting crime to Mexican immigrants. Years later, the legacy of the Horton ad lives on.
That was the beginning of Black and Hispanic mass incarceration. So because of the ad, and here was the most significant thing about it. In the debate with Dukakis and Bush, Harold Rollins a black man, asked Dukakis, if your wife, Kitty Dukakis, was brutally raped and killed, would you still stand for the death penalty? And he said resoundingly, no, he wouldn't. That sent the tone to America that Democrats were soft on crime and that they were allowing these things to happen. Now, Bush won by a landslide, and Reagan had increased funding for federals for prison. Bush increased that by another 22%, which means that an average of 33% of the black population was incarcerated. But that didn't get bad until this.
So 25 years after the 1994 crime bill was enacted, we are still having conversations about the import and significance of the bill.
That 1994 crime bill, it did contribute to mass incarceration in our country.
It's important that people remember the context of the political environment in the early 1990s.
The other big piece of legislation on Capitol Hill tonight is the crime bill.
Now, violent crime peaked in 1991, and the drafters of the bill didn't know that in 1993 and 1994 when they were drafting and signing it. Urban areas, urban cities across the country were ravaged by crack cocaine, and Americans were afraid of crime. The 1994.
Oops.
So 25 years and violence in the United States. And at the time, the Congressional Black Caucus was part of the debate around the crime bill. And the Congressional Black Caucus didn't want every provision that was included in this bill. It became clear that the provisions in the 94 crime bill were going to be a political compromise. And so the history is much more complicated than is sometimes portrayed.
Now, the 1994 crime bill, it was roughly $32 billion. $32 billion by today's standard would be $320 billion. By today's standard, that would be the equivalent of $570 billion. Where did that bill go wrong? Well, federal government was now looking at incarcerating people, in which they had a high level of people doing county bids, but not federal or state bids. So what that bill did was just about every state wanted a piece of that $300 billion. If I could quote Lyndon Johnson, if you convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. So the crime bill became money for the states. Now, who said that crime doesn't pay? The worst thing about it is that in the actual crime bill itself, people don't remember the social policies that were in place. You know what people remember? Hillary Clinton's statement and Joe Biden's statement. Joe Biden was the champion of the crime bill because of the simple fact that, let's face it, during the 90s, during the crack era, there was a lot of crime. And it wasn't in the suburbs, it was all in the urban areas. So even the Congressional Black Caucus wanted something to help people in the urban areas. But they remember Joe Bill saying that he put his name on a crime bill. The reason he championed it is because he added in the sexual harassment piece. Yet the Republicans tried to use that against him. And one of the biggest defeats in Hillary Clinton's campaign was the simple fact that then she was working with her husband, Bill, and she said she made a statement in its entirety about the crime bill and how it was helping people. She made the statement about its social issues. But the thing that stuck in America's mind, or Black America's mind, is that she called them super predators. From that point, that was the defeat of her actual bid for president. As a people struggling with the economic fallout of COVID-19, there's a growing sense that the economy wasn't working well for many, even before the lockdowns in the late 2019s. In the middle of the theoretic economic, the strong economy, income inequality hit a record high. Now, under Obama, the poverty level had decreased. Once Trump came in, it started to once again increase. And the biggest thing is once Trump came in is that the $300 billion had now started to dry out. So they were letting people out. The economic impact caused what they called a cavernous wealth gap between blacks and whites because of the mass incarceration. So basically what was considered to be a misdemeanor, because federal dollars, they were giving them state bids, turning them into a class 3 felony. And once you incarcerate someone, statistics show that after incarceration, there is roughly a 52% in earning gap. So they're getting out with nothing, having a record, and having to struggle to feed their families. That brought about the known fact of recidivism. Black people getting out, having nothing, and then going back to prison. It got to the point where in the mid 2010, 2015, that they stopped building new prisons, and what they started doing was just recycling the old prisons because people just kept coming back. So we're talking about an annual 16% of the people were swept into the criminal justice system, already on the edge of poverty, coming out with nothing, and then telling them, okay, go ahead and do something. So we're talking about today's date, or actually the survey was in 2018. Over 70 million Americans had a criminal record, and nearly 8 million of them have been in prison, leading to where we are right now. So without further ado, we're going to take a break, and I'm going to introduce two guests on mass incarceration and the effects in the Black community. Eddie, take it away. Okay. All right. Count me down after the commercial, Ed, and we'll get started.
Yep, no problem. You guys are muted, so feel free to talk and, you know, kind of. What? You're running the commercial, you said, right? I have the power to mute y'all? Nah, you're still the host. Yeah, come on, big guy. You can unmute everyone. There you go. Definitely a lot. Yeah, right? You got about like 15, 20 more seconds left. Yeah, right? Alright. Yeah, I'll count it down in just a second here. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. Okay, let's dive right into this. As always, a host in front of the show, we've got Dr. H. Gene Wright. Dr. Wright, how you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Great, great. And would you introduce our guest?
I sure would like to. We have Mr. Ricky Duncan, who is the executive director of NOMO PA FACT. And he's going to tell you what that is and what that means. I've known Mr. Duncan for more than a decade. He and I have worked together and continue to work together to provide opportunities for young people in Philadelphia. He's going to tell you about that program. And we originally met in what used to be SCI Greaterford, and he'll tell you about that. And Mr. Duncan, I consider him my little brother. He's not little. He's a grown man, but because of my age, I affectionately call him my little brother. But please welcome Mr. Ricky Duncan, the Executive Director of No More PFAC.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doc, and you guys. Thank you all you guys for having me. Yes, Dr. Wright. I'm proud to be known as your little brother, and I'm proud to call you my mentor. As Dr. Wright just spoke of previously, I met Dr. Wright in SCI Greatest 4 as a member of the program that I now see as Executive Director. PFAC, let's just start there because...
Well, hold on. Before we go into that, how did you end up in Greaterford?
Well, I ended up in Greatest for I was locked up at that time for a drug offense, gun charges, and an aggravated assault.
Wow. So under the Criminal Act of 1994, you got extended term?
Of course, yes. Exactly. That's when I was arrested. Exactly, 95. I was sentenced to 6.5 to 15 years in prison. But how it works inside of Pennsylvania Department of Correction is a sentence of 16.5 to 15 years can turn into a possible life sentence depending on how you extend your charges. Because every time you catch a new charge in Pennsylvania, they take all your street time away and make you redo the incarceration time. So everything that you do when paroled is considered at liberty time, and at any at liberty time can be put back on your back time. So my 6.5 to 15 turned out to be roughly almost a 22-year sentence.
Wow. Let's look at the impact of that. 22 years. I mean, how...
From a 17-year-old kid.
From a 17-year-old kid. Wow. What sticks fondly in your mind about that?
Well, it's definitely not a correction. When they say Department of Correction, it was more Department of Corruption. It was like, it took a lot of digging to get to guys like Dr. Wright, and the people like the FAC program, which wasn't established until late in the 2000s, which is almost a decade later from the time that I was incarcerated. So it affects you a lot because you don't really get a chance to grow mentally. You do grow physically, but mentally you don't really get a chance to grow. And all the academic education that they put beside you is always outdated. So it hurt, man. Watching your family grow up through Kodak and Polaroids, which don't even exist no more. But that's how I had to grow up, and guys that I didn't have originally going in at Holmesburg Prison that's now closed a Dr. Wright as a mentor. I had, a Dr. Detroit, like a gangster boogie, or somebody that's in there that's actually trying to steer you towards the wrong other than steer you towards the right.
So you were pretty much raised by criminals.
Of course, yes.
Well, wait a minute. There's this huge misconception that people go into prison and they get that education of prison and they come out to be bigger, better criminals.
Well, it's going to be two things going to happen. If you're going to do the time, or the time going to do you. So when you do get incarcerated, you have a choice. It's two roads you can walk. It's the road to redemption, then it's the road to, to retaliation. So some people feels like the system did them an injustice by incarcerating them, and that now the system owes them. So they go out looking to get back what they once had, or they go out to probably get more than what they once had. And that's through a life of crime. We have something that's called, I've developed a program that's called the CAT program, Criminal Addicted Thinking. Criminal Addicted Thinking is similar to a drug addiction. Nothing changes. So in order to develop yourself you have to use cognitive thinking, changing your way of thinking and saying that I'm going to go out and do it the right way this time, because which wasn't spoken about is the reason why my sentence turned into a 22-year sentence is because I went out and I came back. And that whether it's a misdemeanor, whether it's a citation, if you catch any type of charge, all the time that you was out don't even count.
You go back and you do your time.
You go back and you do all the time that you've done on the street, plus all the time that you were sentenced to.
Wow. What changed it for you?
People like Dr. Wright, losing, taking some losses. Like I was sentenced, this last sentence that I did was a 10-year sentence. And in all my years, I always thought I could do time on my head because I became used to it. I became institutionalized of them making a revolving door. Other than them trying to correct my behavior, they were just trying to add my time on, as what you, just going back to what you showed in the PowerPoint beforehand, before we went to the break. Like, it's designed to stack your time up. They don't care about what you do while you're in there. If you do the same thing that you do every time, they'll release you. But if they feel like you're a win for them, meaning you're going to reoffend, they'll send you right back out there to do the same thing, knowing that this is your mindset. But with me, it took me losing my grandmother to cancer, my little sister to lupus, you know, and this was my household that I grew up in. So I basically came home to an empty home. When I came home, my grandma and grandfather had old timers. I grew up with my grandmama and grandfather like most kids that was born in the 70s did, you know. Mama and Papa became, you know, your mom and dad through the crack era.
Right.
So being able to come home and losing so much while incarcerated and being told by the Department of Correction that you're a threat to society, so you can't attend these funerals, you can't do bedside visits, you can't do any of these things. It was like a wake-up call for me, because I felt like I was doing my family injustice, and I felt like I was handicapped. So
Okay.
it was like, yo, listen, I never want to feel this feeling again in my life. You know?
So, Dr. Wright,
Yes.
they basically locked them up to they were in their 40s, and that way they're no longer a danger to society?
As Ricky said, they're not really concerned about any of that. What they're concerned about is getting as many black men off the street as possible. And so the level of danger is not even an issue. You have so many people in there, and Ricky can tell you, we work with these brothers on a regular basis that are not dangerous. They don't have violent crimes. Most of them are somehow related to drug of some kind, either selling or addiction, you know, that they've committed some crimes. And there's not really a level of dangerousness. The whole concept of a danger to public safety is really not what you think it is.
But you gotta say that. So we gotta, and I'm always about trying to. I look at it through this lens, right? So the black man in there is a danger, right? Again, if you go back and you say what we're here for, or why they have us here, to be the commodity to the wealth and power of the corporation white supremacy.
But they were commodity to the wealth and power of the state.
So those people who have benefited for hundreds of years, right, from white privilege and have advantages where blacks have been marginalized. Well, every freed black man and woman is a danger to that position. So see, we hear danger one way, they feel danger a different way. And so moving Ricky off the street, he's no longer a danger to replace that white person who has been benefiting from the brutality of the corporation white supremacy, their white privilege.
And let me tag that.
So here's the thing.
I'll tag that by saying, and I'll admit that, you know, I just thought it was a game. I played this game along. I was illiterate to the fact of me being warehoused and being used as a statistic. I knew none of this because I didn't never change my way of thinking. I didn't take time to dig deep enough into realizing this, because you have guys in there, as Dr. Wright just said, that has doctorate degrees. You got guys that got bachelor's degrees. You got guys that run world-class programs that benefit so many people, right? And these guys are denied the right to society. But you'll have a young kid that, like I was, that are coming in and getting a bunch of trouble, right? And be in the way. They know that, you know, and they'll send me right on home, right? But and don't bother me while you're there, because they know that I'm more of a threat to myself than I am to them, and which I become is $1 to them. Because, you know, if you play the odds, you say, well, listen, if I let this guy out, chances are he's not coming back. But if I let this young gunner out here, chances are we'll see him within 98 days to 6 months, because we already know his mentality. So they'll parole me. So last time coming home, I didn't have that mentality, and I was doing the right things, and I had the Dr. Wrights, the Tom Reeds, the Dr. Tom Reeds, the Sam Stanton Jr., Connie Greer's, councilmen and things behind me this time, and I was determined to do the right thing. I'm gonna be honest. This was my hardest, even though I've weathered the storm. I'm no longer on no supervision. My first time in my life that I ever come home and not return to prison, had no violations or anything. You know, I did 5 years on parole, came home, knocked it out, and got it out the way. Something I've never done in my life until these guys came into my life. But this was my hardest time on parole ever in my life. Why is that?
Because you were doing the right thing.
Exactly.
That's why.
Okay. So we're going to get into the program with Dr. Wright, and I've got the wise men and women who are just waiting to jump in. So we're going to come back after this break. I'm Vincent Squire, and we're waiting to hear what you got to say. Eddie?
Beautiful, guys. Beautiful. Yeah, right? Mhm. We got about a minute left, guys. "30 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to What You Got to Say. I'm Vincent Squire. Now, we were talking with Ricky Duncan, formerly incarcerated, and he expressed that this was the hardest thing because he's actually doing the right thing. Dr. Wright, tell us about the program that got him on the right path.
Yeah, I'll start it and I'll let Ricky finish it. It's called, How We Met was a program called Fathers and Children Together, which was started by the lifers that were doing, that were at SCI Greaterford. And those individuals saw young men that Ricky described, and he described himself as one, as going in and out, that revolving door that Ricky talked about. And they noticed that most of those young guys had children. And they're like, well, wait a minute, what can we do to make a difference? So since many of us are not going to see freedom, and they knew that, they said, but what can we do to change our community? What can we do to build up the community that we helped tear down? And so those lifers put together a program called Fathers and Children Together. That's how I met Ricky and many other guys. And there were some juvenile lifers that are now free that I've gotten out that ran that program. And then some of those brothers are still, unfortunately, incarcerated. Some of them are political prisoners, and some of them are just got incarcerated when they were older, so they didn't qualify for that Miller versus Alabama decision that let some of the juvenile lifers out. And then once Ricky got out, he took over the program and has advanced it into NOMO. I'll let him take over from there, from the NOMO.
Yeah. One of the reasons why the guys like Sam Magic, Peanut Popcorn, and a lot of great brothers that was, Shadid, that they looked at the guys because the main goal was to stop the school to prison pipeline. How do you stop the school to prison pipeline? And we decided, and they decided, that by putting the fathers back into their life, because a lot of these kids don't suffer from mental illness. They suffer from incomplete families, not having a father in their life. So by having Dr. Wright and them and Dr. Reed and Sam Stanton Jr., Penny McDonald, and all these great people. Like, they came in as father figures to us and mentors. And then you had the maternal instincts with Mama Penny. Like, she came in and she gave us stuff. And it was the teachers before we even got back into our children's life, what it is to be a parent, to be a father. So hopefully while we reinsert ourselves into the children's life, that will stop them, because they said most children of incarcerated parents are likely to be incarcerated themselves. So in order to shut that revolving door and shut it closed, we have to stop the generational curse that falls down the line of the incarcerated child being an incarcerated themselves. So that's where that came in at, with the fathers stepping into the children's life. And what happened is we was able to connect with the schools, them allowing us to be part of the parent-teacher conferences, reading our kids' stories. Then the kids was able to come up on a visit and sit with us one-on-one, minus the secondary parent, and just sit there and be able to, like, dig deep. And we was able to tell our stories to the kid, let them know, apologize to the child. And what that created was one of the steps that we went over was the bond. Because incarceration, whether you like it or not, the bond is what it should be, because it relieves itself, because you don't have the pressure putting things together. So we built that bond with our children, man, and I was able to come out and be able to add to that when I was able to come home. So first thing first that the Fathers and Children of Together program teaches you is that, which is now known as, we had to rename it as Families and Children Together, because women are likely to be more incarcerated than men these days. So we didn't want to be discreet with anybody. So we wanted to make sure this program is beneficial to all incarcerated parents, not just men.
Well,
so,
Ricky, we're running a little on time. So they've been very patient, and I can see them kind of a little antsy to get in. So I'm going to introduce you to the wise men and women, Reverend Dr. Lang, Iman Bashir, and Rabbi Frisch.
I'm all ears, and I'm all open book. Let's go. How y'all doing?
I wanted to just jump in very quickly and say that, when I look back on the biblical tradition, which has a lot of impact on all of our lives, Moses, he was raised in a world that very few of us can touch, but we can feel. And it wasn't until he fled from, at his birth, there's no men. There's a mother, there's a sister, there's a princess, there's all kinds of fairy tale, but there's no men. And it's not until he leaves Egypt and flees Egypt, which is really the house of slavery, that he goes in the middle of the Sinai desert and he meets a black family. Yeah. And he's never found any better instruction, better teaching, better father than his wife's soon-to-be wife's father. And that changes his world. And so I understand this program that you're talking about, because we all need that. Whether you're a young woman and you need a mother or a father, or a young man, you need a mother, you need that. And the experience of the black man, black women, black families in America is families are ripped apart. It's not by accident that we have the expression, sold them down the river, split up families. Okay. It's not by accident. It's used all over. And so I really, I heard what you had to say, and I felt what you had to feel, because it touches on my experience, from my past. And thank God you met Dr. Wright, and others just like him. And I'm hoping that other people are able to find that as well, because you are on the right path. You are.
So Iman, is this an unfamiliar story?
No, not at all. Actually, I was very moved by Ricky's story. But at the same time, too, we used the concept of, quote, mass incarceration. And of course, this diabolical plan goes beyond just the incarceration. It also goes to what happens after a person is released. But really, what really struck me was the fact that I speak to a lot of men, and their stories are similar to Ricky's, in some cases identical. So that should actually prick our human consciousness to make us think and reflect and say, wait a minute, this is not just something that just is haphazardly taking place. This is something that's orchestrated, because how can so many of us have the exact same story.
You know, I'm intrigued, Ricky, by your sense of self. You know, sometimes, well, oftentimes when we get institutionalized, whether that's a systemic evil of incarceration or just a systemic evil of just being in a system that's counterintuitive to who we are in the spirit, I'm impressed by your sense of self, just that ability to be authentic and to really come to some self-reflection to say, this was my part in it, but this was also the system's part in it. So help us to hear, how did you hold on to yourself during that long period of time where they were really trying to fragment who you are?
Well, it took a lot of self-reflection, looking in the mirror, and like you said, taking responsibility for the part I played. And they call positive imagery, where so I had to, reflect upon and use empathy, and also reflect upon that I left children out there, and it was like, listen, if nothing changes, nothing changes. In the book that I read, it says God's not going to change the condition of people till the people change the condition of themselves. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. And if I was to continue to do the same thing over and over again, it's insanity and expect a different result. That wasn't going to happen. So I had to step up and what we call man up. I had to man up, be the man that I say I am, that my birth certificate say that I am, and step forward, because I no longer was a kid. It was time to be a man for me first, then a father to my children behind that.
Well, there's straighten out a cliche. Everybody in prison tends to find God.
Well, I mean, I think everybody goes in with a spiritual being. Most households, if you go back to your moral development as your upbringing, if you dig all the way back to where it started from, I think everybody entered one of the houses of God's at one point in time in their life. So sometimes you got to reflect and dig back and go back to that part that made you who you were. Because a lot of times, kids, you remember when you was in first grade and you raised your hand, nobody said they wanted to be an inmate. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
That's right.
I don't remember that in my class. So sometimes you got to remember who you said you was and who you was going to be and what got you and what made you happy. So sometimes getting a spiritual being in your life, it comes to give you that sense of tranquility that calms you down. And if, like I said, nothing changes, because if you can't get it right yourself, you got to go to those that know. And who better to go to than a spiritual being?
And I like to say that in Islam, we have a term, it's called fitra, which is actually the natural way in which God created all of us, all human beings. And part of that fitra is having God consciousness. But oftentimes, because of the environment that we live in, we're just so busy, we're so distracted that it buries that fitra. But oftentimes when the brothers are locked up, they have the time to reflect and do what we call in Islam is muhasabah. Muhasabah basically means self, looking at your inner self, right? Meditating and reflecting. And oftentimes you see that in the prisons, that brothers, that they will become more religious. It's not that the religion was not there. It's just that it was covered up because of all the distraction.
But prison has a way of isolating you, making you lonely. One of the things that you deal with is the existential pain of the loneliness. Everybody in your life is progressing, moving, growing. He said he's seen his family grow up on Polaroids. Yet in that existential loneliness is when the divine voice comes to you.
Yeah, hey, listen, I actually just got a Polaroid camera the other day from a great friend of mine.
Let me just mention here that,
man, you go way back, man.
Man. Remember, you used to fan the little things on the picture.
Listen, he didn't know what I wanted with this camera. He was like, "Why would you want this camera?" Only I knew why I wanted that camera, because the reminder benefits.
While you're talking about prison is perhaps a positive, I'm having trouble with this, to be honest with you. Prison as this thing that causes this positive outcome to be able to see yourself and to reflect on yourself. And of course, it makes me think of Joseph in the Bible when he's in the prison and he rises, he's thinking only about himself when he goes in, and when he comes out, he saves all of Egypt and I'm having problems with that.
I'd like to jump in on that, Rabbi.
Let me just say one thing.
Go ahead.
What the problem I'm having with this is that prisons, after the Civil War, at least I think, and I'm not a historian, I agree, and but prisons became the new plantations.
Yes.
And I'm loath to think that we should be lauding the plantation system as it made good Christians out of all these people. That just horrifies me.
I don't think that's what.
That ain't what he said at all. So that's why I wanted to jump in.
Jump in. We all want to jump in on that one.
Let's go Dr. Wright, Dr. Lang, and then Eva.
Okay.
So yeah, nobody said. And all you got to do is read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and you know nobody's saying that the prison system is a good thing. But what I hear Ricky saying, and what I heard the imam say is, you take the conditions in which you are in, and sometimes it can wipe away the distractions that kept you from being able to connect with yourself when you were on the street. And so now you have a lot of time, and you have a small amount of space and a small window to actually understand what you are dealing with, that self-reflection, what we psychologists call introspection. And Dr. Lang knows what that is, the ability to look inside and say, okay, who am I now? The last thing I will say is that when you are able to do that and ask yourself the hard questions about not just who am I now, but what Ricky asked himself is who do I want to be? And so it's not even a matter of what I used to be when I was on the playground and I didn't raise my hand to go to prison. No, we got that. But do you remember who you were? For some people, that's too far back. And what I will tell you is that your current self, and this is developmental psychology, your current self, we're all looking to be what we want to be. If there is too much distance between who you are and who you see yourself to be, there is a risk for depression. And I have found that individuals in prison try to shorten that distance between who they are and who they want to be. The successful ones are able to compartmentalize that stuff and then really focus in on that. And one of my first books, The Cure for Spiritual Depression, was actually inspired by my working with the guys in prison, because they're the ones that share with me. When I first came to prison, I thought I was letting down my parents, my loved one, my sibling. But the more time I spent, the more I realized I had let down my God.
Dr. Lang?
And that's what I heard the imam saying, and that's what I heard Ricky saying. Go ahead, Dr. Lang.
I would say that being institutionalized, whether it's behind bars or in your neighborhood, sometimes that institutionalized thinking moves you to survival mode. And as a young black man, he went in at 17. I would imagine in Philadelphia at 17, there was institutionalized thinking from the people that were around him. So he couldn't have got to that place in his life without people around him being a negative influence, because we focus on what we see as much as what we're told. And so as he moves from being in survival mode within his community to going into survival mode in the institution, when he's away from one negative element and moves to another negative element, his mindset will then change. And so in that sense, faith is relative. So you might have the faith in your community, God keep me so I don't get killed out here, but help me function in this dysfunction. And then when you move into behind the bars, God keep me in this dysfunction so I can figure a way out. So that movement from being unhealthy to healthy, whatever that transition needs to be, doesn't mean that it was safer. He might have been safer in jail. And that's just the truth, because the life he was living out there were a lot of other elements that were out of his control. But being inside the institution, the elements that were around him, he had more control over. So like I said, faith is relative. So whether he knew God before he went in or knew God after he went in, the experience of going in and out, in and out, in and out, helped him to be focused and say, wait a minute, survival mode is not getting me anywhere. I've got to take a cognitive approach to my own life and say, what am I doing?
And it's just to tag off that, would thank y'all for both of you, both the doctors, for interpretation of what I was saying. But at the end of the day, that's why I compared the criminal addicted thinking to the NA program. Because when you incarcerated mentally, whether you're inside the prison, like doctors said, or outside the prison, people that recover from drug addiction, they tend to get closer to God as well, because they know that it's a power above them. And then once you take that identity, and what I didn't say was, when I said it back to the moral development, with all the stages of moral development being your pre-conventional stage and when you're inside your home, your conventional stage is when you're outside the home and learning things from outside the home in your conventional stage. And when you're taking whatever you got from your pre-conventional stage and decided who you're going to be as a person. This is where things got mixed up at. So guys are not just going to prison and going to the mass jigs and the churches. They're also going back to the basketball courts, back to the baseball court, back to the art drawing again, because they're going back to their original being on what made them happy before the drugs, before the crime, and before all these other things. So it's not just about walking into the magic. They're also walking into classrooms, because they did realize that I did want to be this when I raised my hand. I did want to be a doctor. I did want to be a lawyer. I did want to be these things. So they're not just walking it. It's a lot bigger. And I'm not saying that you should. This is something to praise, being in prison and being to elevate yourself. But you got to turn that penitentiary into a university if you choose to develop yourself and better yourself and take yourself to the next level. And if it takes God being in your life to do it, so be it.
Iman?
Yes. Oh, well, basically, I think for the most part, it was said what needed to be said relative to, this specific discussion. However, I would just say that when we look at the human being and human development, we have, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And there can be slavery and incarceration on all of those three levels. But the highest level of human growth and development is the spiritual level. And that's why people can be physically incarcerated, but they can be free because of the spiritual. And that time and that introspection allows them to do that. And I think Ricky is a definite example of that, a positive example. Matter of fact, I want to hook up with you, man. I think that I can utilize you, man, for some speaking engagements. I think you'll be very positive for a lot of.
I get 10% finder's fee. Okay.
Real quick, Vince. I'd like to say one more thing. That this story is not over.
No.
Okay. The thing that I love about Ricky and your story, Ricky, is that you didn't just stop with improving yourself. And I want, Vince, I want your audience and your listeners and your viewers to get that. Ricky moved beyond self-improvement to giving other people, our babies, I'm an old dude, so I can call them our babies, they teenagers, giving them an opportunity to not experience what he experienced. Because he's right, some of them don't have moms and dads that are involved. And so what Ricky and his organization, NOMO PA-FACT has done is take Philadelphia children and give them an opportunity to remember who they said they wanted to be when they raised their hand on the playground. That's the thing that is so powerful about rehabilitating yourself. And that's what Mr. Duncan has done, is he's taken all those compliments he gave me and Dr. Reed. I appreciate it, but Ricky, you are the one that takes credit for this. Amen. You are the one that made a decision, and praise be to Allah and God, you did not stop there. That's what I'm most proud of, Vince. Mr. Duncan said, okay, I'm good. Now let me help somebody else be good. Let me help somebody else get some things together. That is the thing that we need to know.
Yeah, I think everybody doesn't know the acronym. Okay.
I know you've been patient. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, Ricky.
No, I said the acronyms, the NOMO stands for New Options, More Opportunities.
Yes.
And that's what NOMO stands for. And that's what we tend to create for, it's an early initiative intervention prevention program to, like I said, stop the school to prison pipeline. We try to, there's no entry over re-entry. And we getting rid of the state pen and sending our kids to Penn State, as Ron Waters would say.
That's right.
And that's the old.
Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
Eric.
Well, listen. Well, I mean, what I got out of it, listen to the spirituality, the connection to God or some higher being. Where I see it, or as I've seen it through some of my family members and some of my really close friends, is that there winds up being a disconnect with authority and accountability, right? So folks tend to not be accountable to anything or anybody. And so they go wayward. When you start to, whether it's God or mentors or then I see the search to be accountable again, right? To have something that says, that you answer to, because that anchors you into a different behavioral pattern. That's how I hear it. But the focus for me, Ricky, and so when you talk about ending the school to prison pipeline, and Vincent, you and I talk about this a lot, these socially transmitted diseases that permeate our community, right? And we have to be cognizant of them, and we have to work to remedy them. And so programs like that help to do it, and guys like you help to end that cycle, right? And it's important for us to do it, and to know, as the good doctor said, and she said it so eloquently, you have, these insidious forces out there working actively to ensnare you, to ensnare Black Americans, right? Because they're clear in their minds about who they believe we are and why exactly we're here. And all they're doing every single day is readjusting the mousetrap. So when you got out, right, and then you got ensnared again, there was a readjustment of the mousetrap to bring you back in, because you have a responsibility to be a contributor, right, to the wealth and power of the corporation of white supremacy in their minds. Okay. And it's always going. And we have to be vigilant, and we have to continue to fight. So I applaud you, brother. I really, really do. Keep up the good work. And,
thanks, brother.
Yeah, man.
We're going to not take a break, but I want to put into your minds this. We just had a presidential election. In every campaign cycle, one of the main topics that they come is true restorative justice. So, and this is going to be difficult. So, 2 minutes. What can make true restorative justice? Let's start with Rabbi.
Oh my God. You have to start with me?
Come on now!
You know what, Vincent?
Oh my God.
I love you, but come on.
2 minutes, Rabbi.
All right, this is what I want to say, and I'm going to say it to Rick, I'm going to say this to all of you. I'm just astounded, and maybe Eric and I are in a similar rowboat here, but as much as we can have these come to, Allah moments, or come to Jesus, or come to whatever I see prison, I don't see it in the positive ways, even though you denied the positive ways, but I don't see anything good about it. It's plantation. And okay, so we can have these kind of moments where we become the person that we either were or should be, and close the. I know that the prison system in America was originally established, at least that's what they said, for rehabilitation. I know it's a mass failure, accompanied by mass incarceration. And where Eric and I agree, it's a factory. The reason they want to keep you in there is because they want to draw every penny out of you. Well, and while they're drawing that penny out of you, they're drawing out your soul. And this maybe is the area that I'm missing from what you're saying, but in drawing out your soul, we have to restore. If no one else, somebody's got to step up and help to restore
30 seconds,
but everyone's soul. And that's the problem I'm having right now, Dear Vincent, thank you so much for putting me on the hot seat. I didn't want it, but that's what I'm thinking, and maybe you can help me. Okay, there you go.
Let me go next. Yeah, let me go next, and I'll take 20 of his last 30 seconds. My only disagreement with you, Rabbi, is that the prison system was created for rehabilitation.
Oh, I know it's not true. I know it's
no,
not
I know, but I understand what you're saying, and so the history, which I want to take up my 2 minutes by giving the history, but every time, to go to Eric's point about tweaking the mousetrap, every time there's been an advance, it's only been because they found out another way to do it. And so you move from slavery to Jim Crow. You move from Jim Crow to mass incarceration.
Total agreement.
Read Michelle Alexander's book, but not just that. Danielle Sered, S-E-R-E-D, Danielle Sered, talks about restorative justice. Okay, so I'm not going to try to redo everything that she said in that book. Read that book.
Okay,
It'll tell you where we are.
The
restorative piece is what people like Ricky and I and others are working on. We are not satisfied, Rabbi, with just saying, I found God in prison. We're trying to shut the thing down.
Good.
You know, Kempis Ghani Songster, trying to shut the thing down, right? Different ones that Ricky and I know from working together. We want to end the prison system, not find God in the prison system. So yes, like Dr. Lang said, while you're in the worst conditions, you will find your God. That doesn't mean we're trying to go to prison for that purpose. But since it is being used in that way, find what you need while you are there.
I hear you.
The final thing about restorative justice is that it's a small sliver of restorative practice. Restorative practice is the bigger piece. And in Philadelphia, working with the DA, the public defender, the court system, the behavioral health system, we're all working together. Reverend Dr. Donna Jones is leading this effort. We're trying to have a restorative city so that we don't have these prison, school to prison pipelines. We're trying to actually shut that thing down. And so restorative practice is about how we see our fellow human beings. How do we work with each other? The fact that we have an imam, a reverend, and a rabbi on this program tells us that we are speaking to a group of people who already get it. We have to get this message to the rest of the community. Thank you, Vince. That's restorative practice.
I'm with you, brother. 100%.
Okay, Vince, if you don't mind, if I can go next, I have like a hard stop. I have another engagement at 5:20 exactly. If it's possible, I can go next.
By all means.
Okay. Restorative justice, right? I just recently had a situation at our building at NOMO, right? During a looting time. I don't know, some people may be familiar, some people may not be. 2 young kids. They came up to our building. We just got it. We was in there renovating. These kids threw a brick through my window, right? Came inside the building, stole a few laptops, left, ran out. My camera caught everything. Security camera caught everything. I got the footage. I went on social media. I didn't demand the arrest of these kids. I didn't demand the beatings of these kids. I demanded that these kids be turned over to me so I can give them what someone gave me, which was a mentor, some guidance, and an opportunity. No more, new option, more opportunity. The guys felt faith in the fact that our history preceded us, and they knew that I wasn't going to steer them wrong, so they turned themselves into me. They could have, it's chances of I could have lied. They could have been going to prison. They could have went to jail. But no, what I did with these kids was when they came to me, first thing I did was, because I identified them on the camera, that these kids needed a whole lot more than what they were trying to take out of my store. Because they thought it used to be a City Blue, so they thought it was a City Blue. Anyway, fast forwarding, when the guys came in, they was a little disheveled, and I could see that something was missing. So we took these guys out. First thing we did was register them for the program, which is an incentive-based program where they can earn a wage every week. We registered them, made sure they had some money in their pocket. Then we put some money in their pocket. We took these kids out, got them a haircut, got them something to eat, took them shopping to buy them what they were intending to steal from the building that used to be a City Blue. We bought them that and made sure that they had things to put on. Brought them in the fold with us. And ever since then, one of the kids had a criminal offense that was lingering. We made sure he had an attorney so this won't be detrimental to him and hopefully end his life by getting a felony on his record. So these same youth that did this, that threw the brick through the window, looking to get some sneakers and some clothes for him and his little sister, and one guy that his dad's in jail doing 25 years, that's been in jail since he was 9 years old. The other guy, his parents is out of the country. He's living on his own in a shelter. So I didn't know none of this when they threw the brick through the window. But today, these guys comes to our building every day. They clean, they sweep, they move, they volunteer. They got out the black boats. They went out there. They helped move new furnitures in there. They got another job. People that came and volunteered jobs for them. Got them some more clothing. They're actively a part of our program until this day, from the day that happened. And that not a day go by that these guys don't call my phone early in the morning and say, Mr. Rick, you need anything from us today? What time you want us down there? That's restorative justice. Not throwing these kids to the wolves, not knowing that what this criminal system will do to you, not identifying or having empathy of who you used to be. Having empathy, identifying the problem and adjusting it accordingly with peer-on-peer mentoring and with real models. I say not role models, but real models, because everybody that's in our program been there, done that, and these people can live through their experiences. So through real lived experience, not through PhDs, this is how we help these kids to restorative practice.
Oh, Ricky, I know you got to go. So I got a nice goodbye for you. I want to thank you for being on our show. We appreciate your insight. And look, what it takes is you. It takes soldiers like you to stay in the fight. Don't let up. Don't let your foot off the gas. If you need help, all of us are here to back you up in any way we can. So please stay in touch with the show. We'd love to have you again.
I'd love to come back, and thank y'all for having me.
All right. Iman?
Okay, in a short 2 minutes, we'll try to tackle this. But I think that I'll start off with to set the premise with a verse from my holy book, the Quran, where God says that Inna Allaha yuhibbul muqsatin, which is translated as surely Allah God loves those who are fair and just. So I think even and when we look at like restorative justice, I think we first have to start with social justice.
Yes.
So the social justice is very important. Now, one thing, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but for the most part, people who have education and for the most part, people who have jobs, they don't commit crimes. So I think that in terms of in terms of attacking this, I think we have to look at all of the influences and the social status of people who commit crimes. And if we can address the education system, if we can address having jobs, I think that that's important. Also to the sentencing. The sentencing has to be fair and just. We can go back in history in terms of the crack, you mentioned that, and cocaine. We all know the history of that and the same thing is happening today. Also to the parole system. We know that blacks and some Hispanics as well are unfairly treated in terms of the parole system. They are sent back to jail on frivolous things. So we have to address all of that. And I think that that's the foundation, or at least the start of getting to where we want to be at in terms of restorative justice. There's a lot more that I can say, but I'll leave it there.
Wow. Eric.
Yeah, man. So first I want to say, Rabbi, when you said that the prison system is a failure, no, it's not. It is a huge success for the people who built it. It's working exactly the way that they designed it to work.
Let me just say, I hate being wrong.
Yeah.
But I feel
it's a matter of perspective, right?
But for them, it's a right from one perspective.
Yeah, it's a major success.
100% right in what you're saying.
Okay. So I want to just read the definition of restorative justice as I searched it, and I'll answer your question. It says impact. It says what are the main principles of restorative justice? Impact, consequences, and reparations. I want to stick on reparations. The principles of restorative justice define crime as an injury and recognizes the need for actions to repair that injury. So Marianne Williamson, and I said this to you earlier, Vincent, during the election, said to me the most profound thing on the stage. She said, there's a moral turbulence in this country. And until we address that moral turbulence, it's the foundation of all of this stuff, right? How it all happened, how it all started, what it all is built on. We really can't get anywhere. You can't build a house from the second floor up. You got to build it by having a solid foundation. So to what the imam said, we have to address it at the foundation. There are injustices that were done. There's a repair that hasn't been made. We want to sweep all of that under the rug and then take those who have been victimized generationally by these injustices, right? By this moral turbulence, and then try to figure out how to deal with, this form of restorative justice with Ricky. And I'm going, we got to go way back. We got to deal with some other stuff. Yeah, I'm not saying we can walk and chew gum. So yes, we need to work at this level where you're working Dr. Wright and where you're working Dr. and Imam. But there has to be this honest conversation, right? And there has to be the will to have it, right? There has to be the courage to have it. That talks like Marianne Williamson said, because she wasn't being paid by any of these corporations. So when she talked honestly about this moral turbulence that we need to address, and then reparations, and then repair, and then repair. And then folks talk about just money. No, it's psychological repair. There's a bunch of repairs, a bunch of ways that we go about doing that. You know, so that's what I got to say. Thanks, guys.
In terms of our restorative justice, it has always been far to the other side. What we went from penitentiary, or bringing them to penitence and reconstruction or reform, to just containing them and holding them because they were a bigger wealth. We went from people getting out of prison with degrees and a skill, which kept them from recidivism, to now locking them up, letting them go, knowing that they haven't changed, so that we can bring them back. And I agree with you. Prison is a miserable, hard experience. And what we have to do is change a lot of it. We have to change, one, society itself, and understanding that locking a person up does far more damage, because it's the gift that keeps on giving. We continue to lock people up, and as he said, and as we know, that now we have children without fathers who are doing well, and everyone else who are going awry. When we continue to lock them up without any type of marketable skills, they get back into the life of crime. But one thing that I do know about prison is that in that existential loneliness, a lot of people do find their true self, their true calling, and their true purpose. Just like he said, as Moses did in his period of isolation, and Joseph in his period of being incarcerated. We do find a sense of purpose, and it is up to those who are to do like Ricky, to decide that this is not what I am called to be, and to change it. And then they even get to the point where changing it and making it better for everyone else. Let's stop putting a stigmatism on our black men who go to prison and giving them the scarlet letter, in which they need help from the community and the churches and the mosques and the temples. They need our help. They need our help as people and citizens, because if not for the grace of God, they could beat us or our brothers and sisters. Let us stop putting the stigmatism on them in terms of their failures, but put our arms around them in terms of rebuilding. I'd like to thank, hold it.
Answer the question.
Hold it. Let us save the best for last.
Well, that was a great comeback, boy.
That was a great comeback. That was the perfect segue for what I wanted to say.
Okay.
So here's what I'll say, Vincent. That restorative justice.
I'm going to give you 3 minutes.
Oh, well, thank you. Restorative justice, that's real cute. We come in, we talk about it, we have our little parade, and we say this is what we want to do. But what are we restoring them to? Restorative has a connotation, a spiritual connotation, that they're being restored to something, right? And so we talk about in the Army, there's no atheists in the foxhole. So I think about life and I think about where we are. We're restoring them to what? Because we've been acculturated to believe a lie. And so we're restoring them back to a system that hates them. So we got to go before that system and say, where was God in the beginning? And I remember being 7 and going to an AME church, and we did the Decalogue every Sunday, which was Deuteronomy 6:4. And then when I was 8, I went to the synagogue, and the very first thing the rabbi taught us was, "Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gan yachad."
How good it is.
How good and So how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together. But then he also taught us Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shema Yisrael, and Elohim Adonai Echad. Our God is one. And so as I come back to the AME church, the Decalogue and Psalm 133, they're engulfed in who I am. So if you think about restoring people back to who they are supposed to be, it has to be a faith conversation. And that faith conversation has to look at race. It's got to look at gender. It's got to look at entitlement. It's got to look at who you think you are, who God says you are. It's got to go all the way back to the beginning. Because I could say, I'm going to go and I'm going to be restorative justice persona, the epitome of restorative justice. I'm going to go find all the women. I'm going to try and get them out of prison. But what am I taking them back to? If I have no sense of self, I'm taking them back to my perspective of what restorative means, of what justice means. So I agree with what Eric said, that we got to have an honest conversation. What is the thing we're restoring them to? Because it's a bunch of foolishness right now. You got inmates getting paid $2 an hour to move COVID dead bodies, and nobody thinks that's crazy.
Come on.
That make no sense.
Actually, I think it makes sense. You know why? They're making money. They're making money.
But it's not touching the consciousness. But what I'm saying is, nobody's saying, "Oh, how did we get to this place?" I think people are asking the wrong question.
Yeah. Look, I'll go back to the first thing I said. When the black man arrives in this country 400 years ago or so, he's brought here for a specific purpose, and it's to make money. And it's the economy, stupid. And I'm not calling any one of you stupid. I'm calling the society irresponsible in that we're not having this conversation, Doctor, that you're suggesting. This is a plantation. And
they don't want to have the conversation. The truth is, they don't want to have the conversation.
They don't.
Because it messes up their money.
They don't want to have the conversation because the conversation means that they have to confront their sins, and then they have to admit their sins, and then find a resolution for it. And they don't want
to. Listen, they don't want to have the conversation because it's a waste of time for them because they don't want to relinquish all of their benefits. That's it. So wrapping them up in the sins and all that other stuff. Look, they want to win. So when you had a guy like Donald Trump say, you don't want them moving into your neighborhoods and you don't want them invading your space. You don't want them competing with your children for jobs. You don't want them doing these things. Those folks who feel as though they have reached the mountaintop, they have no interest. Why should they negotiate? They operate from a position of power.
But you got to understand, Master went to church. And when Master said to the pretty little black woman, "Come on inside, I got something for you," he's trying to, but then he raped her. And he was all right with it and sent her back on her way.
That's absolutely right.
There's no consciousness right there.
There's no consciousness. There's no compromise on their end. And look, and what we see, and we talked about this earlier, I know I got to go. I'm getting text messages, but you got me on. Look, here we are. We see it. 71.5 million people, for whatever reason, are on this side, right? During the election. Then you got 77 million people over here, right? This is the country we live in. And we, as Black Americans, have to wake up and understand that there is no compromise. And here's the danger in it, right? Even when I talk like this, is the danger of being radicalized, right? Criminalized. Because folks say, "Oh, Eric is an angry black man now because he's talking like this." No. See, Martin was they radicalized Martin and they put a bullet in him. They radicalized Malcolm, right? And then they separated him from the community. See, so that's what they do. So the truth, right? And Malcolm talked about the media and how the media makes the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent, right? So as you start having these honest conversations, the media steps in too, and we have to be clear about who that media is. We can't embrace them when they're on our side, right? Or we believe that they're on our side, and then condemn them when they're not. They're the same media all the time, and they're never for you.
And when you think they're for you, you're under the delusion of being inclusion.
They're never for you. And so
you think they're with you.
Look, I wear all day, every day. This is what I wear. And I wear it because I want people to understand that I know who I am. It's important for them to know. I know who I am, but it's important when I engage them that they know who I am. And now we can have an honest conversation. You understand what I'm saying? So when and I tell you, I get stopped all the time. You know, Walmart, Target, people say, and then we have honest conversations. And some of them are uncomfortable. But I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. I'm a Black American with rights because this country was built by my ancestors. Free labor. That's it. And so that is the foundation of the conversation that I have with everybody.
Well,
by the way, built by your ancestors with no restorative compensation.
There you go. That's right.
That is the key. And they're not going to give you that $2 an hour unless you load bodies into a cooler truck full of COVID bodies, and no one's going to let that cheap labor go. So if Ricky wants to know why they kept him in there for extra time, it's because they were making money with no restorative compensation in sight. And we need to understand that. We can talk all the spirituality in all the world to get one Ricky out, or two Rickies out, or three Rickies out. But the conversation on a mass level, or should I say a massa level, needs to have to happen.
Say it, Rabbi.
Well, now that everybody's radicalized.
By the way, I just want to add, I am a rabbi, but I am AME. And you know what that stands for? African man enraged. And I'm so sorry, Dr. Wright, that I'm enraged. But I'm enraged because of the threat not only to the society, but I'm enraged because it's a threat to me.
But why are you sorry? See, we gotta now I'm gonna take you on your Africanness, right? So when people say that I'm angry,
like you're hurting.
I don't understand. I don't know.
Everyone's got to listen to Vincent. Vincent is our
David Baldwin said to be conscious, and Black in America is to be in a constant state of rage, right? And so
you're gonna round Eric up. The co-host is round up.
It was like a shot of adrenaline to him.
I'm enraged. I am AME every day, 24/7, and I don't have to wear your hoodie to prove it.
There you go.
Okay. But you know something also too, if you in extension of this conversation, in terms of the making money, the enslavement, et cetera, look at some of the statistics in terms of how many of these quote state prisons, county prisons, federal or whatever are now owned by private entities.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Well, let's
a whole nother show.
$320 billion in every state and every county was competing for it. Okay, that's enough for me to hear. And then it rises to $570 billion. By the way, that's $10 billion per state if you parse it out correctly. I don't think I need to prove my case here.
And everybody.
Mom's case.
But here is the thing. They got the money. Black America got the shaft.
Well, they got the plantation. They got Jim Crow behind bars.
Yes.
That's what they got.
And then releasing them was the same thing as the Reconstruction period. Bye.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Speaking of bye, and because you guys making our show really difficult.
Well, that's your fault, Vincent. We put you in charge.
Just keep the good part.
Next time we may have to exercise the mute button.
Oh, okay. You going there, man? You going there?
On all of y'all.
It was a pleasure.
Why you gotta go there, man?
Okay, listen. Thank you.
See you next time, Eric.
All right, brother. It was a pleasure.
Bye,
Doctor.
I love you, Doctor. I do.
Can we close the show first?
Okay.
He's trying to close it, Vince. He's trying.
I'm trying, brother.
I've been trying to close this show for the last 22 minutes here.
Okay, do your job.
Listen, guys, it's been great. I am so proud and honored that you are all on the show. Your views, your opinions, your passion really gets people to spark that conversation. And having that conversation gets us further. We move it further. And I want to thank, Rabbi, Iman, and Reverend, and Doctor.